G'day, welcome to Moreton Island. It's fantastic, it's just a glorious spot. But the funny thing is, it's right in my backyard. It's only an hour or so away from home, and yet I've never really been here, not in a four-wheel drive. I've dropped in a few times in fishing boats and kayaks and things, but never had a good look at the island. Now, I don't know why that is. I guess it's because there's so many other places in Queensland to go to, and there's all that outback out there that I love travelling to. This place being so close, maybe that's why I just haven't dropped in. But I'm here now to have a good look around for a week. We're going to have a look around, it'll be great. And they tell me it's such a romantic place to be too, so absolutely perfect to bring the love of your life. In my case, that's Milo, and here we are. Anybody makes any cracks about leaving another wreck out here, forget it, all right? Milo and I, we're here for a lovely holiday, and then we're going home. Moreton Island is 40 k's east of Brisbane. It couldn't be easier to get to. There's a couple of ferries. The Combi Trader leaves from Redcliffe and the MI Cat leaves from Port Brisbane. It was the MI Cat we went on. It's a big new boat. It's very plush. I'll tell you what, the 2-hour trip out there with the bar and the scenery and everything else is pretty idyllic, to say the least. On the way out, you get a good look at what's happening around Port of Brisbane too. Plenty of big container ships to watch being loaded, and this is where the fuel ships dock too. I guess these days you want to see those big fuel tankers coming in, don't you? Because most of us need at least one of those a year to keep us going. My father-in-law works on a ship out here. He's probably down in the engine room of that one right now, I'd imagine, working up a killer thirst so he can come and pester me as soon as he comes home. As you come in on the western side, on the MI Cat as we are, the first thing you notice are all these old wrecks lying around. They were sunk here on purpose, 40 or 50 years ago now, to make a bit of a natural reef and give the shipping a little bit of protection. The funny thing about Moreton Bay, and I can verify this because I've been sunk there a few times over the years, is that it really can blow up. I mean, in places, it's really not much deeper than a couple of cars placed one on top of the other, but it's amazing the waves and the wind that can play up in Moreton Bay. We were really lucky, it was dead calm to date. Moreton Island's not a very big place really. It's 38 kilometres long, it's about 7 kilometres wide. It takes up 170 square kilometres, which when you think about it isn't much bigger than a lot of stations in Australia. In fact, it's a lot smaller than some of the outback stations. It's a great place though, it really is. 98% national park these days, and pretty soon they're going to implement a new park management strategy too, which is going to cut down the number of campsites from what I can see, and there'll be a new way of booking them too, using the web to make sure you do get a good campsite. Right in the middle of the Tangalooma wrecks here is the old mothership from the whaling station days. Tangalooma Resort doesn't like to push that button too often these days because they've got a lot of Japanese tourists staying there. But the fact is that that was the principal source of income from Moreton Island for many years. For about a decade back in the 50s and early 60s, Tangalooma was one of the most profitable whaling stations around. There's never very long on Moreton Island when you're either away from the sea or away from sea creatures. The right time of year you can see whales cruising up and down on the eastern shore, dolphins nearly always. Every day there's a dolphin feeding at the resort, which is probably a hangover from the days when the dolphins used to go there for a free feed after the whaling. There's always dolphins circulating the island. We saw stingrays, you see all sorts of things. It's just fantastic for marine wildlife. If you get a chance to look around Tangalooma Resort at all, it's pretty highbrow. It's a nice place, you know, quite expensive though. You'll see in the middle of it several old concrete structures that are what's left of the old whaling station flensing yards and things like that. And not only that, a lot of the staff at Tangalooma are still living in the old whalers' cottages up the back. Bulwer, on the northwest coast, has got the only shop on the island, apart from the gutter bar down at the south, and it's got the garage as well, so you can get fuel, bait, ice, things like that from Bulwer, no problems at all. They sell grog in this shop too, which can be kind of handy for some of us. I reckon on average, you know, you could do Moreton Island in a weekend, no problems at all, but it's much better to have 3, 4, 5 days there to have a really good look around. Even though at high tide you can drive around the whole island in a couple of hours, it's worth having a bit longer to explore and of course relax. This is the northwest tip of the island. The sand's a bit softer up here and there's plenty of little tidal crossings and whatnot. In fact, you can get well and truly lost up here trying to find a route through the inland to skirt some of the rocks and whatnot. But if you follow the marked tracks, it's not too hard at all. From the lookout on the northwest tip, you can see all the way up the Glasshouse Ranges, you can see over to Caboolture, you can see the big ships coming in and out of the port of Brisbane, and of course you can see people out there just enjoying the day. It's an absolutely glorious expanse of sheer bush and sand, this island is just great. All these sand islands are fairly similar. It's funny, you know, Fraser, Morton, Stradbroke, they all tend to have a sort of a long, thin, narrow sand collecting area down to the south, and the northeast bit is where you'll find the rocks, or the more permanent end of the settlement, I guess you'd call it. That's where the bays and interesting features are too. It's almost impossible to let a day come or go on Moreton Island without having a bit of a fish. Even for the world's worst fishermen, this is the way to go. And of course, it's not a bad place to sip a cold beer either. Even though there were no known fish runs, so to speak, on the week we were on Moreton Island, we still managed to catch fish virtually every day. Most of them were edible too. But you'd be amazed how easy it is to let them go. Even though we're only 40 k's away from Brisbane, the stars can be seen so easily at night. You're right outside that bubble and nothing but fresh air blowing all the way from New Zealand. Well, hopefully most of the fresh air is coming around New Zealand and coming more directly to us. Morning everybody. Oh, waking up on Morton, isn't it glorious? Nearly as good as sleeping in. See ya. The campgrounds at Morton have got really nice facilities these days. They're only cold water showers, but the pit toilets are good and it keeps everything nice and tidy. We spent our first night in this northeastern campground and then we went off towards the south to try and find somewhere we could set up camp permanently for a few days. There's a well-worn track up around the northern corner that takes you around the back of the rocks and up behind the lighthouse. The track up there is like most of the tracks on a sand island. It's dug well deep into the sand, and in places you'll be looking out your window at ground level just about. It can be fairly soft, but it's always easy driving as long as you've let your tyres down and you're in four-wheel drive. Well, we haven't come very far, but we've come to the northern tip of the island already. This is Cape Morton, and it's the highest spot on the island. You get an awesome view. This is where the lighthouse is, of course. It's fantastic. It's a funny thing, isn't it? I mean, Cape Morton, Moreton Island, Moreton Bay. You sort of get the feeling that when they named everything in Queensland, there were 6 people and a dog living here. A few more than that now. Let's go and have a look. The lighthouse was first lit in 1857. That means it's been sitting here flashing away for over 150 years. This is the oldest lighthouse ever built in Queensland, or certainly the oldest one still being used, and it was built from sandstone blocks that were quarried right here on the island. I guess that makes sense, it's a sand island after all. The lighthouse was built by prisoners. Civil prisoners they were, brought over from Brisbane. You can imagine they would have really been complaining, you know, sort of let out of their little 6x4 cell to come out and live on Moreton Island in a bit of a hut here on the headland and enjoy these beautiful views, and no doubt a fresh swim and lots of fishing and surfing. Oh, Struth, it sounds pretty good, doesn't it? I wonder if they need another lighthouse built. I could handle being in prison over here for a while, it'd be great. The view down the main beach is really quite awesome from here. You can see virtually the whole length of Morton. Every now and then you get tourist buses coming through, the big four-wheel drive ones from the resort, but nowhere near as many as Fraser or even the back blocks of Straddie. In fact, they're pretty rare. It's a good thing too, because you don't have to dodge them. Fortunately, there's not that many rental four-wheel drives out here full of backpackers. They can be a bit of a hazard up here in Queensland, but it seems to be fairly well controlled on Morton. There's nowhere near the traffic that you see on the other islands. You do see conveyor belt roads, especially this one up the back of the lighthouse where the sand gets pretty steep and soft. It's a really good way to protect the track, keep everyone in the same sort of orientation, and to be honest, without it, I think we'd be pulling snatch recoveries here 2 or 3 times a day without any worries at all. The conveyor belts do give you a fairly bumpy sort of a track, and people tend to take them fairly slowly for good reason. I guess the biggest problem here is hitting a couple of those big bumps in a row and rocking over if you're a bit too top heavy. That's not me that's top heavy, by the way. I'm talking about the truck here. You can make quite reasonable speed down the main beach, but the fact is there's a 60km/h speed limit all over the island anyway, and to be honest, who wants to rush? I think Milo's quite happy at about 50km/h down the beach, and I like to slow right down whenever I see anyone out there fishing or whatnot. I mean, with 3 kids of my own, I know it's just too easy to have some kid charging up the beach. Take it easy and enjoy it. I mean, you know, it's only 38 k's anyway. We decided to stay down at the Blue Lagoon campsite, and like all the turn-offs and indeed all the campsites, you need to have a little bit of momentum to get up through that soft stuff and get over the first crest. The trick is to go and have a look first. Don't just barge in if you don't know where you're going. Just have a quick look, make sure there's no one coming, and then, you know, give it a little bit of berries and off you go. This is Blue Lagoon. It's about 3/4 of the way up Moreton Island on the eastern side, so it's not that far from the Lighthouse. Just tucked inland a little bit. You can hear the sea just over there. Freshwater lake, absolutely beautiful. And I reckon that the water, certainly by the taste and the look of it and everything else, it's every bit as nice as anything you'd find on Fraser Island, with one exception. It's the middle of the week. It's not that far off summer, but there's no one here. This is fantastic. I'm in for a swim. Years ago, there was a little dugong pup called Pig. And Pig was one of the first dugong pups that was sort of bred into captivity as such. And they wanted to release him back into the bay. So what they did was they put him here in one of the saltwater lagoons to grow up and get used to being in the wilds before they released him into the wild. Gee, I don't know why I was reminded of that story of Pig the dugong right now. Sunsets and sunrises on Moreton Island are just spectacular. You feel as if you really are in the middle of nowhere at all and you can see forever. And when the sea mist rolls in and you're down there on the beach and there's just a little bit of a breeze in your face, oh, it's just awesome. It just makes me want to go straight back to the tent and have another beer. We're camped at the Blue Lagoon campsite, which is about 6 k's down from the tip of Moreton Island. And we're going to use this as our central base for a few days exploring the island. That, in my mind, is the trick at Moreton Island. Find a nice campsite, and there's plenty. Set up your base there, use it as a base camp, and then when the tide's out, you can drive pretty much anywhere. I mean, the whole island's only 38 k's long and 10 k's wide. Might be the 3rd largest sand island in the world. It's not very big when you've got a 4-wheel drive and the tide's out. You can get around, get a good look at the place. And I guess something has to be said about that too. I mean, I'm probably the first person to complain about no camping signs and bollards and all the other restrictions that modern life has sort of put on top of us. But the fact is that we're talking about an island that's a very delicate environment. Fraser, similar, I guess Stradbroke too, to some degree, nowhere near as much. Morton is a sand island, and therefore you need to minimise the impact of the 60-odd thousand people who come here every year. And that's really that's to all our benefits, isn't it? The sort of things you need to think about, well, we don't use native timber at all for firewood over here. You can buy bags of really good firewood at where the ferry takes off or at the Bulwer shops. Don't bring your animals along. They're not allowed anyway. It's all national parks, and really it's just going to cause nuisance value to everybody. When you're swimming here, whether it's in the lagoon or a creek or something like that, yes, I know 30 or 40 years ago, soap up, have a good time, but not these days. That's why they've built shower blocks around the place. They might only be cold showers, but hey, that's how you keep clean these days. It has to be. Otherwise, I mean, you can imagine, a busload of Scandinavian backpackers pulls up and they all hop out and wash their lovely long hair in the creek or something. All those soap suds, all the damage it's going to... Oh, it could be visually interesting, yes, I agree, but that's not how we do it these days. It used to be, not anymore. There's too many of us out there. If we want to keep places like this open, we have to make sure we minimise our impact, each and every person. So we don't use new campsites, we use old ones. We don't cut tracks across the dunes, we use the old tracks that are already there. We look after the place. It's our country. We really need to look after it. On Morton, they've achieved a beautiful balance of this. Some places it's overdone, but on Morton, most of the eastern beaches are campable. There's no problems. Camping is allowed. Similarly on the western side, most of it is free camping. That's the way it should be in Australia, as long as people play by the rules. Remember, the most important one, of course, is we don't bury rubbish anymore. We take it out with us. Every little bit of rubbish, out, bang. Pretty easy. As much as anything, it'll give you an excuse to drive to town. I think we might do that now, actually. The whole trick to driving on a sand island is to pick your time. You don't want to be driving at high tide or anywhere near high tide. Mid to low tide's best obviously, and you've got a good 2 or 3 hours where you can go anywhere. The difference is amazing. In Milo, it equates to cruising down here at 50 kilometres an hour with the throttle barely off the stop. It's just doing it so easy it's not funny at low tide. But I know from bitter experience at high tide, if we're up there in the soft stuff, we're going to be doing maybe 10 or 15 kilometres an hour, and the truck's going to be working really hard, putting a lot of strain on everything, not to mention putting all that sand up through all the seals and bearings and whatnot. So, I mean, you could drive a car at low tide on a sand island. You might have a bit of trouble getting on and off and up to the campsites, but that's the way to go. Pick your time, stick a few hours either side of the tide. And as far as speed goes, remember, all the normal road rules apply. You know, stay to the left, use your indicators if you're not sure. Beaches can be big. Common sense dictates that wherever you see a car stopped, and they just stop anywhere on the beach to go for a fish, watch it, slow right down, avoid them, go as far away as you can. I mean, if you've got little kids like I have, you just know how unpredictable they can be. Take it really easy. There's plenty of time. What are you rushing for anyway? Gee. Supposed to be on holiday. But it's funny, you know, as far as speed goes, there's a 60 km/h speed limit on the beach, and really 40 or 50 I reckon should be about just fine. As much as anything, that's because the beach can always surprise. There can always be a washout or a bit of soft sand or a wave that's come in. Wasn't there last time you came through, might have been last tide, might have been yesterday, and the whole beach could have changed. It happened to a mate of mine just a little while ago, a couple of weeks ago, Hendo, who's virtually lived on the same beach over near Amity on Stradbroke for years. I mean, the guy knows it like the back of his hand. And he turned his Land Rover on its side just by going down the beach. He was leaning over the back talking to Fat Kevy, and the next minute he turned around, there's a washout. Hendo gave it a little bit of a turn to the right. The Land Rover's left-hand wheels dropped into a soft patch, bit of water, bang, on its side. He was only going slow. I mean, as much as anything, that's because Hendo's slow and his Land Rover's even slower. But, you know, he didn't do any damage really either. Put a few curves into what was otherwise a fairly boring straight truck. But by crikey, you know, you can be so lucky to avoid trouble, or you can take some precautions by driving slowly and enjoying it. You don't get this opportunity very often. Take it easy and relax. Two-thirds of the way down the island is a massive group of sandhills called the Little Desert. I think it's actually the bigger of the two deserts. The big desert to me looks smaller than the Little Desert. But then little always has looked big to me and big always looked little. It's kind of hard to know. All I can tell you is that climbing these sandhills takes a lot of effort. You want to get here, you want to be fit. Oh, here comes some fit young people now. Terrific. And of course, this is one of the great sports on Moreton Island, tobogganing on the sandhills. These sandhills aren't the steepest, the ones in the Little Desert, but they certainly are the smoothest, and hey, they've got some lovely curves here too, in case you hadn't noticed. What a job. Fancy being a tour guide on Moreton Island. That's just too easy. Oh, Struth. Looks like Pig the Dugong's having a go. Good grief. I think it's really a question of gravity, isn't it? As in, Gravity is just holding me back. Oh, look at that. Even on a steep hill I can't get up a slide. Back on the beach and we're heading down the eastern coast again. We want to head right down to the southern tip. And all the way along we've got to stop and film dolphins and wobbegongs and whatnot. The sea is just teeming with wildlife along here. As you head down the eastern beach towards the southern tip, you can see Stradbroke just over the road there. In fact, I think Amity's about 3 or 4 k's directly across from Kringle, which is the little township right here on the southern tip. There's not a lot at Kringle. There's somewhere to leave your rubbish, and there's somewhere to have a couple of drinks and something to eat. And there's a lot of houses too, but no one lives in them. 160 houses, and I think Kringle's got about 30 or 40 permanent residents. As you look around Kringle, you'll notice that there's nothing but interesting old four-wheel drives everywhere. It's our sort of a place. We're right down the southern tip of Moreton Island here. This is Kringle. It's a little settlement. There's about, what, 160 houses?
About 160 houses, yep.
And I'm here with Wade, who's the publican and owner of the Gutter Bar, which is also the only bar on the island, I think.
That's right. Oh, yeah. Tangle Resort.
Yeah, so it's the only real one.
That's it. It's the only real one. It's the only casual one.
Are you open most of the time?
Yeah, we are. We're open 6 days a week. Mondays we're shut. Holiday times we're always open.
Yep.
And we're generally open from 9:30 in the morning till late, depending on your bookings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we don't have any bookings, we're shut by 5.
Well, we just had lunch here and I can recommend that. That was spot on. Wade, tell me about this place. All week it's been sleepy as anything for us. Is it like this all the time? Or?
Good time of the year if you want it to be quiet now.
Yeah.
It is after Easter, but you get a long weekend coming up, which will be quite
busy. It
gets very busy. You know, we can do quite a few meals and that here. So yeah, we get a lot of people through, and the island you don't want it overcrowded anyhow.
No.
You know. No. So this time of the year is the time to come now, and actually I find September's beautiful.
And I guess most of your customers would be four-wheel drivers, wouldn't they?
They are all four-wheel drivers. You can't get here without a four-wheel driver.
So they'd be good people, wouldn't they?
Yeah, they are. They are all good people. They are. And since like four-wheel drives have become more affordable, we are getting more families, which is good. And we are family orientated. So.
Yes, yeah, I've noticed that.
Yeah,
it's good. Wade, we got here on the MI.
Yep.
But just talking to you before, a lot of people don't do that, do they?
No, they'll come through Cleveland, through the Straddie ferries. They'll drive to Amity on Straddie once they land, and then they'll get the Kringle trader across to here. So you can do that island hop, so you can see Straddie and you can see Morton, and go back that way or go off the other end. It's interesting because even as a local, the Kringle trader, I mean, I've heard of it, but they don't advertise or anything, do they? No, they don't. A bit like the Gutter Bar, That's
really.
Right.
I suppose
it's got to be secret.
It's got to be a big secret.
That's right.
Yeah, but it's well worth considering if you're going to make a trip like that. But bring lots of cash, because I've noticed there's no FPOS machines around the place. What do you do here if someone runs out of money, Wade? We've had a couple of stories, you know. I had a local that wanted to book up, and he was talking, and so I took his wedding ring off him. Did
make
you?
Sure, make sure I get the money back.
Well, I suppose he was in first thing next morning, wasn't he?
He was in here in the morning with the cash ready to go. So that was good.
I might leave my wedding ring here, dear. Thanks, Wade.
No worries.
The amazing thing about Moreton Island is that the city is just over there, just a couple of hours away. You can see the smog, you can see the buildings, and yet here we are on an absolute island paradise. The pace of life over here is definitely a whole lot slower. And gee, that suits me. Even though we've been down at the southern tip of Morton yesterday, here we are back up on the Cape. I wanted to have a bit of a look around, so off we went. There's plenty of walking tracks. Most of them aren't marked that well. They tend to be from the kick-off point, but from then on it can be a bit of guesswork. A little bit of tracking doesn't go astray. Just look for the track that's been used the most. And Struth, if you've had some bloke like me go through first, you'll probably notice a few broken branches and things too. There's this beaut little beach up here on the northeast corner called Honeymoon Bay. I reckon it would be a beaut place just to sort of, you know, bring the love of your life here. Except I couldn't get the truck down the track, so I had to walk down behind the back here. It was good to run into Boyd Sparrow again. He's our mate from the Sandhills, and Boyd, he's one of the tour guides for Goanna Tours, who do an awful lot of touring over here. They bring in, you know, the backpackers from overseas. So Boyd's job sort of consists of driving around with 7 or 8 lovely young girls from Ukraine or some other wonderful place, and oh, by crikey, I wish I had his job. It really is a spectacular end of the island. All these little beaches and rocks and whatnot. It's fantastic, it really is. I've just stopped to check Milo's tyre pressures, and you know, sure enough, they're all sitting around 16 psi, which is what I let them off to before I even left the ferry. And that's something you need to know on Morton. You want to drop your tyres on the ferry because you land straight on the sand. Once you get on the sand, if your tyres are around 16 to 18 pounds, you'll be driving around beautifully, no problems at all. Big deep tracks just like this without churning up the sand, no unnecessary damage to the environment, and it's a lot easier on your vehicle. Now the reason I just got reminded is because I've been listening to the squeal, and the last 6 vehicles to go up the soft bit here in about half an hour or so, 2 of them have squealed, well, gee, as loud as the handbrake when I get home from this trip. And the reason is because those 2 vehicles were running their tyres at higher pressures. Don't be a mug, drop your tyre pressures, do the right thing. The weather was absolutely perfect the week we were at Morton. The sun was shining, it wasn't that hot, just cool enough at night to have a nice little campfire, and during the day it was superb, it really was. It wasn't too windy either, which is another thing of course about the Sand Islands. They do tend to get fairly windy on the eastern shores, depending on the time of year and the weather in general, I guess. Now I reckon I'm the world's worst fisherman. In fact, lots of people reckon I'm the world's worst fisherman. But armed with my Alvy and off the end of the rocks, look at this!
All right.
Can get an X and stamp it on my head. We're the slackest generation. Oh yeah, oh so they said.
Oh dear, here we go. Good old Dave, he's bogged the camera truck. This is the sort of thing that can happen when you're too busy looking around for somewhere decent to fish and not busy enough putting your foot down a little bit to get through the soft stuff.
Within your head.
We could have got the patrol out fairly easily using the max tracks or even using the winch. But of course, the most common way to recover any vehicle in a beach situation is the good old snatch strap. Now, it never hurts to run through this one more time. I know you've all used a snatch strap at some stage, but there's always someone who hasn't, and always someone who tends to treat it just like a tow rope. The whole idea about a snatch strap, as I explained to Dave that night as I was banging him around the ears with one, is the fact that it's flexible. You're supposed to get fairly close. You want about half its distance just lying there in a nice couple of easy loops where it won't tangle on itself. And then when you gun the truck in front, it builds up a bit of momentum and gives it a quick jerk. And when I say quick jerk, I'm not talking about Dave. I do realise he's very good on his feet and he has won a few races. But out here on the island, he's in a four-wheel drive, just like the rest of us.
I'd rather go out shopping instead. Work it out within your...
I just caught Dave, one of the camera crew here, picking up some pippies on the beach. He had quite a few of them, and knowing Dave, I'd say he's probably just looking for a chance to duck off and do some fishing when we're not watching. But I got put them aside because, after all, I got to pay him back for getting that patrol bogged earlier on. I've had them soaking here in fresh water. I just want to show you a bit of a local recipe. Now these things, when they're left to soak in fresh water, they'll spit out a bit of the sand and get rid of some of that salty taste, you know, so they'll clean themselves up a bit. They're still alive at this stage, so we need to cook them. I've got some salt water here from the ocean, boiling away. I'll just drop the pippies in. I'll try not to burn myself doing it. Right, I'll just let those boil up now. A couple of minutes, I guess. Bit hard to time. I mean, here in Queensland, we reckon it usually takes about a beer. So I'll go and look after that, and we'll come back and I'll show you how to do something special with them. We'll just check these pippies out. Look at that, nice and open. That means they're ready to go. Took about a beer. That's a couple of minutes to you wine drinking people. Now, what we need to do is knock up a sauce. That'll really make them spectacular. And a very, very simple sauce is sweet chilli sauce. Good old lots of. And some garlic. I suppose I can switch that off now, can't I? Good old lots of. Wow. Whew. That's going to be good. You can tell. We'll give that a good swizzle. I think that's going to need a bit more sweet chilli. I'll just give it another hit. That's it. I actually want more sweet chilli than garlic by a long way. Oh, you know, I mean, to taste, however you want it. Isn't it great? I mean, this, you can make a meal out of this in about 10 minutes. In fact, the way our fishing's been on this trip, you'd probably be better off cooking the bait most of the time. Okay, I'll just empty these out. Another great job here for the old winching gloves. Multi-purpose things, winching gloves, aren't they? Okay. Just tip the water out. Whoa! Sounds like emptying a kid's money box. Not that I'd know how to do that, by the way, kids, if you're watching. Right, there we go. Now all you do, simple as, that's why you can do it while you're waiting for your mates to come back with all those fish. Tip the sauce in. Okay, give it a good old shake, bit of a stir. Ooh, this looks pretty good really, doesn't it? Well, you can't see it. Looks good to me. Smells good too. And I know who I'm going to try it out on. Hey Dave, come on mate, give me the microphone. You try this. All right. See what you reckon. Best bait you've ever eaten, mate.
Mate, could have caught some bream with this.
The way our luck's been. What did you catch this morning? A wobbegong? How's that?
That's great.
It's great,
Beautiful.
isn't it? Hey?
Beautiful.
Right, so go and collect some more bait and give up on the fishing. Well, let's face it, when it comes to fishing, Dave's really good at collecting bait. This is a candid shot of Dave. He's supposed to be over here holding the microphone stand. And what's he doing? The trick to finding the pippies is to look for the little bubble in the sand. And you'll see a little bit of a lump of sand, and sure enough, if you give a bit of a squirm in there with your toes, you'll come up with a nice little pippy. These tracks through the middle of the island, this is the main one, they're one-way tracks, which really does help when there's a little bit of traffic around. Usually you'll find the traffic pretty much coordinated with the times the barges are coming in and out. And a lot of people take this middle track, because it's only 7 kilometres, and just duck straight over onto the centre of the eastern beach. Everything on Moreton Island is very accessible at low tide, that's for sure. It's definitely the place for four-wheel drives though, isn't it? Well, that's Moreton Island. Isn't it fantastic, eh? And it's right on my doorstep. Wow, how lucky am I? I tell you what, you get the little stick on and let your tyres down just as you leave the barge, and that's it, the fun begins right then. Talking about barges, I'd better get going, I guess. I'm booked on the 3:31 out of here. Got a bit of a problem at home. Unfortunately, she'll still be there when I get back. All right, see you next time, eh? Welcome to Roothy's Ruthless Tales. Go on, grab a slice of fair dinkum, Australia. Get your dose of Roothy and put a smile on your dial.